Greetings. Welcome to the latest edition of 153greatfish.com. Today we're going to be talking about the altar of political correctness. So our objective through this is that we want to expose the potential dangers of a corporate-only mindset inside of the church. So Matthew 6:24, Jesus says, "No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other." He finishes that line with, "You cannot serve God and mammon." Mammon is defined, it's a Chaldee word, and it's defined as confidence that's figuratively wealth personified. In other words, we're getting our confidence about who we are and what we do and how we can do it through our wealth. And that's why Jesus said that you cannot serve God and mammon, because where are we going to get our confidence, right? I get my confidence from the Lord, or I'm going to get it from my wealth, from the riches that I have. We cannot serve both, right? One master is going to be God, or it's going to be mammon. And we're starting with that scripture because we're talking about corporations. So a corporation, right, is a company or a group of people that's authorized to act as a single entity. Whether it's a few people or thousands of people, they are defined legally as a person, and the law recognizes them as such. So Amazon, Google, Microsoft, General Electric, Nike, right? They're all considered by the law as people, as persons. And of course, they're going to work towards whatever the common objective is of that corporation. And they come in two flavors. The first being a for-profit corporation, like the ones I just mentioned. Their goal, they operate with the goal of making money, period. Right? They have some kind of product or service, or several products or services that they offer to their customers. The business owner makes an income from that, from the profits of that. And then depending on how they're set up or how they're incorporated, there could be shareholders and investors that get a share of those profits, or perhaps all of the profits. And that's what a for-profit corporation does, make money. Contrast this to a non-profit corporation. Right? That's an organization. It's still defined legally as a person, but their goal is to serve the public good. Charitable organizations, religious organizations, educational. There's some other public service reason, and they exist not just for the purpose of making money or making a profit, right? Because they still need to make money, because that's how they're going to do whatever it is that they're trying to do. But it's not to make a profit. It's to serve the public good. Most churches, they should operate as a nonprofit. And so so we have these two flavors. But either way, the purpose or the point of it is that a corporation exists and is defined as a person with a goal of either making money or serving the public good. The last concept I wanted to introduce here before we get a little further into the presentation is self-preservation. So persons, whether they're actual people or legal people, right, we all tend to instinctively act as to preserve our existence. So the Bible tells us this. God, of course, knew this. Right? He says, "No man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it." And he finishes that to help us understand his relationship with the church, even as the Lord, the church. This is Ephesians 5:29. Right? But I, or any of us, right, for the most part, are not going to knowingly do something that's going to jeopardize our own existence. Corporations, as legal people, are the same way, because they consist of lots of individuals who all have this inside of them, that they want to preserve their existence, and the corporation wants to preserve its existence. It's, corporation is not going to knowingly do something that's going to cause it, to go bankrupt, right? Yes, it happens, right? But usually it's not something that was done intentionally. And so this concept of self-preservation needs to be kept in mind, because as you'll see here in a minute. So what are we all leading up to with this? What this has resulted in, and especially in the past few months as this has become really apparent, but it's been going on for years, is that corporations, all corporations, worship at the altar of political correctness. Political correctness is trying to use language or changing our language so that we don't offend people or a certain group of people. It's, you know, it's everywhere, right? It's everywhere. It's been building, not just here in the United States, but around the world, right? And corporations are particularly subject to, and in fact, they worship at this altar of being politically correct about everything. First it was, or not say first, but the one that springs to mind was the environment, right? All the corporations were saying, we care about the environment. We want to, save the planet. Go green. I remember, you stay at a hotel, it says go green to help the environment. No, they really, that wasn't the kind of green they cared about. They cared about the profit, the dollar green, right? That's what they really cared about. But it was the politically correct thing to say at the time, right? And then, recently, this year, the whole COVID thing, now they all care about our safety, right? Our safety is their priority. Well, that's the politically correct thing to say, right? And then it was Black Lives Matter, and other things that, again, almost like flavor of the month. And you saw it with every corporation. I was getting emails from CEOs telling me that they care about my safety. We're all in this together, right? And then it was all about, Black Lives Matter and, whatever the thing is that the particular corporation was trying to push because it wanted to be politically correct. And this is why they're doing that. Again, corporations, for-profit corporations, they exist to make money. Nonprofits need to make enough money to survive, right? To exist. And so we're trying to make money and exist. That's what corporations do. Right? In order to do that, you need to have revenue. You need to increase your revenue. That's what money is coming in. And you need to keep your expenses low. That's your costs. So you want revenue up, expenses down. So corporations, they don't want to risk offending their existing market, right? Or a potential future market. So if I'm a corporation, I've got a market, I got people that I'm either trying to sell something, sell my product to, or they're already, buying my product, and maybe they're repeat customers. And I don't want them to, get offended by something that I did, or I took a stand against something, or whatever, and they leave, right? And they stop giving me their business, because that's going to impact my revenue. That's going to impact the money that's coming in the door, right? And it's not just customers. It could be investors, right? They could be the ones that, I'm trying to court to get another, to do some kind of expansion, and, they get offended by something that the corporation says, and then they go take their money somewhere else, right? Employees, right? I'm competing with other corporations to try to hire, the best people to do whatever it is that we do. And so you don't want to offend any of those, or you don't want to, isolate or take away, some potential people that could come in and help you make more money, right? Or keep your expenses down. If I'm a nonprofit, I've got donors. There's this pool of money. These donors have money, and they can go to any number of nonprofits. So I don't want to risk offending them. And, well, if I'm a church, I got parishioners. And if I've got expenses, I've got buildings, big buildings to maintain, or small buildings. I mean, there's a cost with that. I could have a mortgage on it because I had to expand to try to, attract more parishioners, or have more services, or more, whatever it is that I was trying to do. And there's a very, high likelihood that I don't want to risk offending, them, especially if they're good tithers. And so, these are the kind of things that corporations, again, they don't want to risk offending a market. And it's really because, or at the same time, they don't want to get sued, right? So I'm trying to grow my business, trying to increase my revenue, but I also don't want to get sued, right? And unfortunately, in our litigious society here in the United States, there are plenty of lawyers sitting out there looking for people that get offended easily to go out and try to sue a corporation because they got all this money, right? And in the end, the people that lose are the corporations. And so they have to now keep insurance. They have additional costs that are there because they're trying to protect themselves so that they can continue to exist and not get sued out of, existence. Because it's expensive and bad for business, right? They don't want that to happen. And of course, most of the lawsuits, or a lot of the lawsuits now, revolve around some kind of person being offended because this corporation, excluded them somehow or said something that, didn't include them. And so everything's being done to try to be inclusive, right? And so now do you see why corporations of many kinds or any flavor, they are subject to that altar, to going to that altar of political correctness and worshiping and doing whatever they can to make sure that they are not viewed as being, I guess it'd be politically incorrect, as the opposite of that. And so let's bring this all back to the point of the discussion today, right? Is that what are the dangers of a corporate-only mindset in the church? We went through what corporations deal with, in the secular sense, but of course churches, especially in North America, are treated as, both legally and how we view them, they are corporations. They're groups of people, entities that have been defined and can act as a person with a common goal. The first being is that, hey, just like the for-profits or the non-profits, churches can worship at the can also worship at the altar of political correctness. Right? This leads to compromising the scriptures in order to avoid offense. We don't want to offend our potential market of parishioners that could come and help us grow the church. And that has led to many denominations, many of the mainstream denominations, throwing out, important, vital, things that God has said in order to be more inclusive. And the consequences of that, are still being felt, right? And there is a constant pressure that is not just, sort of societal, but also in some cases, such as up in Canada, governments, enforcing quote unquote hate speech against churches are trying to do that. So this political correctness altar, we gotta be on guard and make sure that we're not serving mammon, right? The wealth or the perception or the strength that comes from our wealth of the church versus God, right? And that's because a lot of times, especially for the last generation or two, I definitely say at least the last couple of generations, people have relied, and the only way that we were getting fed was by the corporate gathering in the church. We became codependent on pastors as the only way to be fed, scripturally. Oftentimes the only times we were worshiping or doing anything was when we were inside the four walls of the church building. And that, of course, is not the model that Jesus taught and exemplified and that his apostles used to spread the message and to obey the Great Commission that we're all called to obey. Right? And so, but what has happened is that because we're so comfortable with that, we are going to do whatever it takes to protect the corporation. Because we're a part of that corporation, we want it to exist, right? Self-preservation. So we want the church to survive no matter what. Therefore, we're willing to do whatever it is that the government mandates, in order to ensure that we get to keep coming and keep having church. Whether it's capacity limits, whether it's social distancing, whether it's wearing masks or not wearing masks, but lately it's wearing masks, right? Or other government mandates, whether they're constitutional or not, it doesn't matter. But if it's there, and just like any corporation, the church is going to take a calculated risk and say, okay, if I do this, do I risk getting sued, getting shut down, not being able to do what this entity exists to do? Or, okay, I can kind of take a step back and not do that and still be okay, right? Well, as corporations will usually err on the side of caution, and then they'll continue to err on the side of caution. And before you know it, we may be showing up in hazmat suits. But that's that's the danger we're in. People got so excited, and that's what we saw happen recently. We got so excited. You know, a lot of people, oh, I get to go back to church, and let's get it back to normal. Well, if you look at one of the last video we just posted with Brother Tim Green, you know, preaching, we're not. This is the new norm. We're not going back. It's not going to be the same as it was. And thankfully, it's not going to be that way, because God has allowed this to happen to move us away from this corporate-only model because of the dangers and what it has done to the church at large. And ultimately what this has led to is a focus on church growth instead of people growth, right? They're not the same thing. Really, since probably the 70s, there's been this sort of church growth movement. It's very well described in this book, Leading Growth, by Dr. Eugene Wilson. This is the third in a series of books on growth and leadership. Excellent books, definitely recommend them to you. But in there, in this Leading Growth, he talks about church growth and people growth, very different things. And we can grow the church, right? Market the church, get more, you know, butts in seats, so to speak. Oh, sorry, you know, behinds in chairs. Yeah, maybe that's the politically correct thing to say. But we get more people in, we grow our market share, right? We get a bigger building, we get new fancier technology, we get, you know, everything to make us look like we are successful, right? But maybe we have the wrong measure or the wrong, you know, definition of success, because is that what God says is successful? That's the question we have to ask. And instead of, are we growing and spending time discipling individuals that can feed themselves, especially now in an era when we are going to not be allowed to gather in the corporate, you know, model that we have become so accustomed to. So thank you for listening to that. I hope that has sparked some things that God has been speaking to you about. You know, continue to pray about it and how you can work to learn about this area, and how, of course, what the Bible says about it. Continue to be prayerful. We're going to have a lot more coming out here in the next few weeks here on 153greatfish.com. Continue to check back on the YouTube page and, of course, on the website for more. And God bless.